implemented by JMT Consultores, who will also do the presentation today. And basically the reason for this study is that the ornamental sector is already an important sector in Mexico. The Netherlands is an important partner for Mexico in this sector, but a lot of people believe that there's a lot of unlocked potential in this sector and a lot of opportunities for growth. Next to that, the last time we did a study about this sector was in 2008. And after that, there was little concrete data available. So we decided it was a good moment to do this study. And today you will hear the results and the main conclusions. Apart from that, we will also have two other guests on the show. First of all, we'll have Victor Vázquez Navarrete, representative of SNICS, the National Seed Inspection and Certification Service, which is also the agency and the authority responsible for the protection of breeders' rights here in Mexico. And Victor will represent Leo Vigildo Cordova, the director of the agency. And next to that, we have Federico Martinez, president of the Consejo Mexicano de la Flor, the National Flower Council of Mexico. And both will react to the conclusions of the report. After each speaker, you will have the opportunity to ask your questions. Well, actually, during the presentations, you can ask your questions in the chat. And then after the presentation, we'll ask those questions to the presenters, and well, hopefully we'll have time to cover all the questions. If not, then we'll make sure that the presenters get your questions after that. Before we go to the presentation, I would also like to briefly give the floor to Daphne ter Braak at RVO, the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, who financed the study. So Daphne, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eric, and buenos dias a todos en Mexico. Good day to everyone.
Good morning to everyone in Mexico.
Well, yes, Daphne ter Braak from RVO, the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, and we provide services to Dutch entrepreneurs that want to go abroad. And as Eric stated, we work together with the Royal Netherlands embassies around the world, and in this case, with the team in Mexico for this special study. RVO each time more and more works on innovative solutions for societal changes and promoting the sustainable development goals, and also to promote sustainable trade and investments for Dutch companies abroad. So I'm really happy with this study and looking forward to what else is to come. I personally work as a sector account for the agricultural and horticulture sector at RVO. And in my work, I connect business opportunities for the Dutch sectors with demand abroad. So me and other colleagues, we know the sector in the Netherlands. We have a solid network, and we motivate companies, sector associations, and other private and public partners to work together in multi-annual programs. Also working on sector studies, webinars, seminars, which in the end hopefully result in long-term programming between public and private partners. So from this perspective, I'm also highly interested in the results that are being presented, and I wish you a good session. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you very much, Daphne. Without further ado, we'll then go to Enrique. Enrique Arias is CEO of JMT Consultores, the company that conducted this market study. And Enrique is also one of the organizers of the OPF trade show, the trade show for the ornamental sector, which has been held twice now in Mexico City, and for which we'll have the next edition in September next year, if I'm not mistaken. So Enrique, the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias, Eric. Le doy un saludo a
Thank
todos.
you, Eric. Thank you so much and welcome. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Okay. Pues muy bien, gracias por esta oportunidad a la embajada
Wonderful. Thank you for this
y a
opportunity. Thank you to the embassy.
y el poder
Thank you to
coadyuvar
my
con
agency as
información
well.
veraz y
And
oportuna
with the
para las posibles
information that I'm
inversiones en
going to
nuestro país.
present, you're going
Es
to
una
see
situación
opportunities for investment in our country.
Voy a
It's
compartir mi
absolutely
pantalla
wonderful
para
to have you all
comenzar la
here today
presentación.
with us. So now I will begin with my presentation.
Ahí están viendo mi presentación
Can
en
you see my
pantalla.
presentation? Are you viewing my screen?
Ok. Pues bueno, damos inicio con
Wonderful.
Es un documento muy
Let's
extenso.
begin.
Se
This
imaginarán
is
cuánta
quite a
información puede
long
tener
document. You can imagine how much
estudio.
information there is
Es muy extenso,
in
muy
this
detallado.
study. It's
Entonces,
quite
hemos
detailed.
preparado una especie de resumen o
So we've
conclusiones para que
brought
ustedes puedan
together
tener
some
una idea
conclusions for you
amplia
so that you can
y
have sort of a
posteriormente ya
broad
podrán ustedes
idea
revisar
about what
todo
is in
con
here.
calma,
And then
tranquilidad,
you can
ya
have the
podrán
document
ustedes
in your
revisar.
hands
Y al final,
and review it
les pongo
yourself
mis datos para
in
cualquier cosa
detail.
que compartir
I will
con
also
ustedes.
share my contact information at the end of the presentation so you can get in touch with me on any little thing.
Bueno, esto es un estudio de mercado.
So this is a market
Así hay que
study.
verlo. No
That's
es
how
un
we
censo,
have
es
to
un
approach it.
estudio
It's not
en
a
el que tomamos una
census.
muestra de
It's a
600
study
encuestas
where
a
we
productores
sampled
en los
people,
estados de
producers,
principales estados
growers
donde
in
se
the
producen
main
plantas y
states
flores.
where
Es el estado de
ornamental
México,
plants and
Morelos,
flowers are
Puebla,
produced.
Querétaro, Ciudad de México,
Mexico,
Michoacán,
state of
Veracruz
Mexico,
y Baja
Morelos, Puebla,
California Norte.
Querétaro, Mexico City,
Desde el
Michoacán,
estudio lo que
Veracruz, and
entrevistamos
Baja
fueron
California.
a los líderes de opinión del
We
sector
interviewed
en
thought
México, tanto a nivel
leaders
público
in the
académico
ornamental
privado.
flowers section in
Se
Mexico
consideró la opinión de las
at the public,
principales
academic, and
asociaciones
private level so that we could
importantes
get to know their
empresariales.
opinions about the main
Algunas por
associations of
norma y
ornamental
otras por
producers in our
consultivo mismo
country.
de la OPF.
And this has to also do with the
Bueno, más o
Mexican
menos
Flower
buscamos
Council.
conseguir la información a través de las
So
encuestas.
we got information from
Simplemente
surveys
seleccioné
with
algunas
growers.
empresas
We also
holandesas que
talked to
tienen
a
presencia
couple
en
of
México,
Dutch companies that are
a
already
líderes de
present in
opinión, a
Mexico.
líderes del sector
We
público.
talked to
Después
thought
hicimos un
leaders, we talked to
análisis
people in the
y
public
después ya
sector, and then we
realizamos
did an
el FODA, que es
analysis
el
and
análisis FODA,
carried out
las
the FODA
recomendaciones generales
analysis.
y los
We took a
pasos
look
a
at some
seguir.
general recommendations and what next steps were going to be ahead for
La
us.
información que les voy a presentar es
All the information I will present to you are general conclusions because it's a summary of this whole study. So where are we now? Where are we now in the Mexican sector? In Mexico, we have information that tells us that 14,750 nano producers exist. We consider these nano producers without business relevance, seeing as how they're part of the informal economy and they do not have technification. But within the 25,500 growers that we have here in Mexico, 10,818 producers are working to grow full time in Mexico. And there is an opportunity, a big opportunity to do business with these people. And we classified these growers in the following way: 5,805 micro producers. This means 1,929,000 hectares. Then we have the small producers, 3,819, growing on 4,750 hectares. Then we have medium producers, 1,117 on 3,468 hectares, and 77 large producers who are growing on 2,857 hectares. In total, we have 13,000 hectares approximately being grown on with these different sizes of producers. So if we add the nano producers onto there, then we have 25,568 producers within the ornamental sector in Mexico. And we can see it spread out over the states in this following graph. We can see that in the state of Mexico, which is right beside Mexico City, that we have 52% of the cultivated area being managed in that area. These are the two very important zones. One of them is the Villa Guerrero area where cut flowers are being grown. And then we have Valley of Bravo, where we also have cut flowers, but we also have potted plants being grown. And then we have Atlacomulco, which is potted plant production mainly. Then the state of Morelos. This is a place that covers 20% of its area with producers that are growing potted plant. So we have quite large producers in this area. We call these seed material growers, and they also export that seed material. And that is all produced in the state of Morelos because the weather there is just fantastic for that growing. Mexico City has the most important is such an important part of this growing because there's so much consumption going on there. Nuevo León, this is 9% and basically dedicated to growing trees for reforestation. Puebla, also very interesting with 8%, followed by Michoacán, Colima, and Guerrero. And then we have very small percentages following. For example, state of Veracruz, it's quite spread out over there. So we weren't able to get an exact information from that state. Here you can see how the hectares are divided. These 10,000 hectares that we have identified as permanent growing areas are divided like this. We divide them by their level of technification. We want to know how many are. Of course, we also want to know how technified they are. And in the document, you will be able to see how we divided the growers into levels of technification. We have 6,866 hectares, which are low technification. We have 4,304 middle to low, 1,156 that are middle level of technified, 413 which are middle to high level of technification, 264 that are a high level of technification, and then very high 0. This is mainly to produce seed material. Here we have more information, and you can see how these are split up into a sort of a tree. This is the information that I was just mentioning. But here we can see that there is an area for opportunity. We can see that low technification, that 52%, the opportunity there lies in substrates, pots, seed material. That's where the opportunities are here. And those opportunities continue to grow as technology continues to spread. Middle technification growers start to include more automation in their processes or irrigation that is automatic. And this is for companies. We see opportunity for businesses who are offering technological solutions. The market here in Mexico has grown consistently. This is post-pandemic. And we think that there was a little bit of a lag. There was a little bit of a lag there, but this sector has grown. Over the last 10 years, flowers and cut flowers and foliage has grown 42%, 42.15% average per year. Although over the last 2 years, it didn't grow that much, but it has started to pick that back up again. In live plants, over the last 10 years, it has grown 64%. This is in the whole area, not the number of products. Producers have increased their production. And in terms of cut flowers and foliage, we can see something that is quite common and that is also happening in other countries. Roses in cut flower format is quite common, and this is followed by chrysanthemum, the gerbera, daisy, gladiolas. And then we can see that there's a smaller participation from the other varieties. In producing live plants, potted plants, we can see that poinsettia is the most common flower and the most significant one. And actually, we're right now in that Christmas season, the winter season, which is the high season for them. Then we have the marigold, which its season has just ended for Day of the Dead. And then we have the succulents, roses, potted roses. We can see that these are also important plants, but the poinsettia is of the utmost importance. And so here we can see a little how it's set up in terms of species and varieties.
So this was something very important for the survey. We found that there is an interest. That was an important question. Around 30% of ornamental growers are incorporating these best practices in their processes. This represents a good opportunity for the breeders. We see that 34% of the growers incorporate new varieties, at least 23% more than 1 year ago. So there's a lot of investment there. We can see that they're trying new varieties, and we can see that there is an interest. Then we ask this question to breeders to understand what they value. So what are the factors they value the most? You can see that the two most important pieces of information are: one, price. Of course, they're very worried about that. And the main thing is, of course, the availability of the material in Mexico. Again, they want new varieties and so forth. They want help to create these partnerships, to find new markets, new clients. They don't need financement as much because they're willing to pay for that. And yeah, technical accompaniment, that's important. That's something they care about. It's like feeling they are partners, they are part of something else. It's not like, okay, first I bought some seed material and then I never heard about you anymore. No, they really want to feel this accompaniment and understand that they need to be in contact with their partners at all times, to have this relation as a partner, not as a supplier, but as a partner. Here we have some of the challenges for those regulatory aspects. The main are associated with the lack of registry. According to the authorities of the Ministry of Agriculture, foreign suppliers do not make the necessary paperwork to register their patents. So it is difficult to follow up on that. 41% of those we interviewed are willing to pay for those rights. Many of them agree and they consider it fair and necessary. Of course, the other percentage said the opposite. Some of these growers didn't know about this issue. So there are certain irregularities, but it's because of ignorance. Not that they don't want to pay, it's just they didn't know that they had to. So we recommend the communication campaign to disseminate these points and to understand copyright laws in Mexico. We also recommend to establish compliance contracts with respect to non-piracy for the benefit of everyone. That's in addition to complying with the law as a contract, there should also use this contract to comply with the non-piracy or non-propagation, illegal propagation. In terms of research, we can see the main points of interest. In terms of pest control, it was quite surprising for us. That was surprising. We see that there's a big opportunity in terms of pest control, prevention, disease control and prevention, substrate development. So we would like to raise more awareness in this sense. It is still unknown for many growers. So we see that there is an openness, there is a willingness. And that means there's a lot to do. There's a lot we can do there.
Los productores nos manifiestan que
So growers mention that they are interested in participating in R&D projects. 56% said they were willing to participate in research and development projects. However, one of the main obstacles we identified is the lack of proximity, the lack of a relationship. And the research centers are very far away from the growers. We see that the research that is being carried out is quite low, but mainly in terms of the native species. These are not registered, these are not protected, and the academia doesn't really do much. There are no agreements with growers to research in terms of irrigation, weather control, even the administrative aspect, how the sales should be registered, the numbers and accounts and so forth. With regard to sustainability, one of the most relevant problems we find is associated with the wrongful management of plastics. There are many, many growers in Mexico. So making sure that there is enough awareness among all of them that they should eliminate plastics gradually has been very, very difficult. So there is another area of opportunity for everyone. We need to raise awareness for recycling, reusing, and so forth. There's a lot we can do. Another point, Mexico has an amazing solar energy because of its geography. So we need to hamper that. We need to harness that. And well, I'm not very proud to say this as Mexican, but only 4% of growers in terms of cut flowers and foliage export to other countries. This doesn't mean that they don't want to. So maybe they are exporting a tiny part of their production. mainly to the United States because of its proximity. But in spite of having many factors that tell us that the possibilities are endless, only 4% of growers actually export their products. So many of you friends will be wondering why. Mainly the Mexican market is so attractive that they are in their comfort zone. That's why they manage to sell most of their production, even though sometimes at very low prices. But they don't want to take care of all the paperwork and things that exporting would involve. Here I'm going to show you some of the tariffs for Mexico. You can see that the 0.6 tariff, which is for the United States, we have 97 million imported value. That's low in comparison with Colombia. So Mexican participation is really low. It's pretty much the same thing in Canada. Canada uses very much this ITC. They participate a lot. So for the 060311 tariff for cut flowers, you can see that Colombia is a main supplier to the United States with 57.80%. That's 7%. Then we have Guatemala with 11%, Mexico 1.1 in terms of cut flower.
Es un regaño, podríamos decirlo.
This means that, well, we had to scold ourselves. We have a lot of potential. So Colombia has to use air freight to take their products, and we are very close to them. We could do it by land, and by land we can send it very easily because we don't have to cut the water chain or the cold chain. So the life of the flower, post-harvest life, will continue with in less time, with less cost, and still we have a very low participation in terms of imports. That point where Mexico is actually doing a good job is in terms of cuttings and seed materials. We're sending a lot of cuttings. You can see that the US has its main supplier, Costa Rica, then Guatemala, then Mexico. So in terms of Colombia and others, well, they're lower than that. So I feel honored because I come from the state of Morelos. Most of these cuttings come from Morelos. And there are very important investments from different corporations, from Platzers International. Recently, we had a big investment by World Flower Plant. So there is everything we need. The weather, the soil, everything's just perfect for that. Now let's talk about some of the challenges. One of the main challenges that really require us to plan a strategy is how to reach out to those growers. Unlike other countries, which are larger but fewer, here we have many with small hectares. So how are we going to reach out to them? If you're supplying seed material or technology or anything, how are you going to talk to them. It's a very attractive market. We're talking about 13,000 hectares divided in 10 decision makers. So our recommendation is to participate in all specialized strategies. And I want to clarify that this is specialized for the ornamental sector. I am also the president of the OFP, which is an important fair where many producers take part, but we need to be there. We need to make partners with universities, research centers, everything that helps us to network with them and to incorporate them as partners. Because they are in a situation where it is difficult. For example, in terms of there are certain regions in the country, such as Villa Guerrero, where there is no internet connection. So it's difficult to reach out to them. We still need to think about in-person relationships. So we need to go there, we need to take their flowers and come back. And there's a lot we can do, but we need to do it. So in terms of piracy, which is a difficult issue, they're propagating illegally many varieties. Our recommendation is to in addition to complying with the law, we need to establish this relationship with them, and we need to sign a contract of compliance that will benefit both parties, such as an exclusive contract or a networking opportunity or anything, any accompaniment in terms of nutrition and replacement of varieties. You know better what you can do, what benefits you can think about and you can offer. And finally, I want to say that this involves us all. I believe that Mexico can grow a lot more. It can be a superpower. I was telling someone that we are the third place in sound area. We have a big country with a lot of benefits. The weather conditions are excellent. The closeness to the US, our free trade agreements are fantastic. But we can only go forward if we have this fivefold partnership with the producers, with the academia, with the environment, the government, society. So it can be a world-class economy. We have the nearshore concept. That's for exports. After the pandemic, I believe this concept is not that relevant. When the flights were not available, when many things were happening because of the pandemic, there were a lot of problems. And since we Mexicans are in North America, sometimes in Europe they say that we are Central America, but no, that's not true. We have a border with the United States. We are North America. Our altitudes are really, really high. We have many volcanoes. And we have places that go above 3,000 meters over the sea level. We have fresh latitudes for other types of climate. We have a lot of land. We have the shores, all the conditions we need. Mexico has everything. And we have the largest consumers in the world, which is the United States. So again, everything's there. Or low costs. But we see, once again, we have made some assessments. So as part of the Mexican Flower Council and the OFP Consultative Council, we detected that we need more stakeholders, we need more actors coming here. We need to have this vision to export, to comply. And I believe this will give you an overview of what we have in the document. There's a lot more information, but this is the summary. We as OFP and JNT Consultores, we are open. If you want to set up yourselves in Mexico, we're ready to welcome you. And that's it. I thank you so much, and I would like to make the most of this moment to mention the whole team that made this possible, because I didn't do it myself. Thank you to the embassy for the confidence, but also to Gerardo Cerda, Luis Villarroel, Ernesto Juárez, Ariadna Jiménez, Mariano Oropesa, Juan Manuel Cárdenas, Arturo Camacho, Patricia Gómez, Silvia Correa, Alan Medina, Emilio Fernández, Salomón García, and so forth. There were many actors that went to the tiny corners of the country, each from their own fields, doing their best to create this document. So thank you so much for the space, and here I am to support you.
Thank you very much, Enrique. Just a reminder for all the participants, you can ask your questions in the chat, and then we'll be able to discuss your questions in today's session. Also, for those that would like to have more details, I think everyone has received the report by now. If not, please feel free to contact us, and we'll send you a report. The report will contains much more detailed information than what Enrique just presented. And Enrique, also thank you for offering to connect Dutch companies with the Mexican producers, especially those growers that are in the segments that offer opportunities for Dutch suppliers of technology, or for those, or to connect with those breeders, or sorry, with those growers that that respect the breeders' rights, which is an important issue for Dutch breeders. I think we've all seen that there's still a lot of opportunities unexploited in this sector, especially for the export to North America. So I encourage all companies to Dutch companies to capitalize on those opportunities, and together with people like Enrique and others that are here present, we're more than happy to assist you in connecting with growers that could help you and be your partner in this in capitalizing on these opportunities. Enrique already mentioned the issue of breeders' rights, and this is also the topic that we will hear about in our next presentation by Victor Manuel Vázquez Navarrete, which I think, oh wait, we do have a question here. So before we go to Victor, let's go to this question. A question from Mario Silva: what is the growth potential in the Yucatan Peninsula? I don't think the Yucatan Peninsula was in your table, Enrique, of the states with the most hectares of ornamental production. So maybe you know what the potential is, or what the situation is in Yucatan as for the ornamental sector, Enrique.
Sí, bueno, actualmente en Yucatán.
Yes, well, currently in Yucatan, there is some production for some plants that are from the area. But today, Yucatan and the state of Quintana Roo are more consumers of flowers. Many of the plants that are consumed in the middle of the country, for example, in Morelos, leave with live plants that travel by land to Yucatan for real estate developers or for tourists in that area. There are small producers there, but Yucatan is more the big consumer.
Thank you, Enrique. And we have one more question from Yemil about certifications. Which certifications are being required to reach the principal ornamental markets? And as we've seen, the principal ornamental markets for Mexico are basically Mexico and the US in a small with a small percentage. So Enrique, what can you say about that? What certification is required in Mexico and in the US, if any, for the ornamental sector?
Sí, claro, con mucho gusto.
Yes, of course. I'd be happy to answer that. Currently, to export to the United States, we have a mandatory phytosanitary certificate, which is asked for by the USDA and which is emitted by Senacica. So clients ask for these sort of certifications, perhaps Global Gap, perhaps Primus, and I would like to take this opportunity to mention that we do have our own certification, which is currently in progress, and this is called Flor Legal. Now we are reaching agreements with ANTAD, which is the most important association in our country for providing services related to this area. And we have seen that they have started to require different types of certifications or for how people are producing their flowers to make sure that they're in compliance with social responsibilities. And they want to be sure that workers are covered by the law and that they are being protected. It is not yet a demand. It's not being demanded at this point, but the market more and more, especially consumers, are asking for these certifications. Thank you.
Enrique, and I think Federica will probably also mention a bit more about the certification you just mentioned, Floregal. One last question, and then I'm afraid we have to go to the next speaker. What are the challenges for horticulture in Mexico when it comes to labor and labor scarcity? Enrique.
Okay. Hay grandes retos.
There are big challenges. Today, let's start with the lack of. Today, many youth don't want to work in the fields. And this is a significant problem, even though many people live in production areas and they could see this as something that could give them a hopeful future working in agriculture. Well, they want to live in the city. They want to go to the city. So there is a lack. There is a lack. Some production units have to pay transportation for their workers to come from areas that are over an hour away. So the availability of workers has started to become a little bit of an issue. And then the formality aspect, that is a challenge. In this universe of small producers, we do see a high percentage of informal work because many people are also part of their own families who work there. So they don't pay them really as much as they should because they're paying their brother or son or cousin. So there is this informalness to the employment at small producers right now.
I'm afraid we have to go to the next presentation, but Enrique, I see that there's still some questions coming in, so perhaps you could also answer them on the chat function. There's one, for example, about the export opportunities for dried flowers. So, and for the people in the webinar, please continue to send your questions. For now, we'll continue to Victor. Victor Manuel Vasquez is an agribusiness engineer from the University of Chapingo and is now Director of Plant Varieties at SNCS. And SNCS is the National Agency for Certification and Inspection of Seeds, and is also the authority responsible for the protection and the enforcement of breeders' rights regulations. And before this, Victor has been also chief of the ornamental and of the promotion departments of the Ministry of Agriculture of Mexico. And Victor will react to Enrique's report to the market study, in particular about the breeders' rights situation in Mexico. So Victor, the floor is yours.
Sí, hola, ¿qué tal? Buenos días.
Hello. Good day to all of you. Good afternoon to those of you who are in Netherlands. First of all, I want to say to you, congratulations for this study. I had the opportunity to read the whole thing, and it really does have very valuable information in it for people who will be making decisions and who will possibly be investing in this sector in Mexico. And so I would like to help you out with that. Now, here I'm going to focus on the breeders' rights and how this can be effective, how we can surveil these breeders' rights in Mexico. As many as you know, we are part of agreements that are protecting breeders' rights. And even though we have these international commitments, we're right now in the 1968 version. We do want to move over to the 1991 version. And so this has to do with, as I said, the law that was from 1968. We want to have an effective strategy for surveilling breeders' rights in Mexico. I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know if you're able to see that. Okay, I'm going to put it up again.
Si lo alcanzan a ver,
Can you see my presentation? Yes, I understand that you can. Oh, yes, I can see it. Thank you. Very well. Wonderful. Okay. I'd like to start presenting some information to you about what the obligations are that we have as the authority. I'd also like to share with you the obligations for someone who wants to have a new protected variety in Mexico of plant. So we know this agreement means that we have legal rights to protect breeder rights. But of course, the breeders need to be looking out for their own rights at the same time. The current law that has to do with the laws from 1968 and 1991, this is how we make sure that your rights are being protected. And what is the obligation? Well, the obligation is to spread information on applications on what species and varieties are protected. And we do this through our official publications. We have the official diary of the Federation, which talks about breeders' rights, which talks about which varieties are protected, which can be traded, which can be sold, commercialized, and so on. So we also do have the obligation to be monitoring and surveilling these rights. And we do have visits that have been solicited where we go to be sure that breeders' rights are being protected. This is what we're most interested in. People's rights as a breeder being protected. And we have a number of different systems where we can pay for our right by each year. But if you didn't pay for your breeder's rights in 2 years, well, that's going to be an issue. And if there are some changes, we have those made public to people. Now, the area where we think we can work together is to be sure to have an effective transfer of what varieties are going to be registered.
Enrico was telling us about the face-to-face contracts for non-piracy and so forth. And in terms of what we need to do for the surveillance of breeder rights, yeah, there is a high perception that there's an illegal use of protected varieties, mainly for roses. However, we feel that in the last 3 years we have received less than 3 requests or 3 complaints, and there are years where we don't receive any at all. So what we detect in this period of time is that 6 out of 10 requests presented deficiencies that didn't allow us to go forward or to investigate or to do anything we need to do in order to carry out any solution. As you can see that's mainly for roses. Most of those requests are for roses, but they're so few, and there were many deficiencies in terms of their paperwork and so forth. So we have started a procedure taking into account the regulatory framework we have right now. That's the seed trade law we have, which is another legal framework to surveil and trace the seed production, and also the federal law of administrative procedures. With this law as a basis, we have this procedure of 4 steps to file a complaint with all the information that we need in order to continue. Now we have implemented this procedure. That's can be improved, of course, but we are implementing already. And what we need right now is the support of all the stakeholders that are involved. I just want to mention the case of berries, for example. These crops have been very dynamic. And what happens? Well, they do have certain contracts with the producers to ensure the traceability of all those seed materials. They ensure the copyrights. So we can see that there is not, we don't know if this same mechanism can be implemented for ornamental plants, but as you can see on your right, you'll see the dynamics of these crops in terms of new varieties in Mexico. As you can see, we have raspberry and strawberry, which have been very high in the last years. They have grown by 20% at some points. And there are new varieties. People are requesting their breeders' rights, and this doesn't happen for ornamental plants. We see that the requests for new varieties for rose have decreased by 10%. So that's that we are losing opportunities there. And I mentioned that because, yeah, we see that there is an intention, there is a willingness to pay the royalties and so forth, but there are other issues. And for some time already, these have been commercialized in the US or other countries, and then they're registered in Mexico, and we still see that there is a period of more than 3 years where these varieties are commercialized in abroad, but we're still missing the certification in Mexico. Now we have another approach, which will be registering these in the national list of ornamental varieties. This will allow us to become part of the certification systems, which would imply that the authority will be obliged to trace the seeds and to encourage the rights, the respect to the breeder's rights. That will be the responsibility of the authorities to make sure that these seeds comply. What have we done? We had 625 registered ornamental varieties. Nationwide, we have 27 species. 473 of them have some sort of breeder right. But the most important thing that I would like to highlight is that there are no certification programs at all. So in this case, if this is plant material under these qualification systems, as the authorities, we should establish certain protocols to help us to certify the seeds or this plant material for roses, for chrysanthemum. If necessary, we can start using other protocols or other documents. We can also do that. But we need to better support and encourage traceability. So what we are proposing now is to work throughout the value chain so that all stakeholders have this win-win approach. Here we have some sort of summary of what we have done throughout the value chain, from the generation of varieties, it's their registration. We have 162 varieties in the national list of plant varieties. That's to say the seed certification protocols. Now, in terms of the seed quality certification, we have two protocols that help us to certify the seed, and we are ready to implement that. We just need the requests. We need people to start filing the request to become certified. And of course, we have been discussing that with the growers, with the breeders, and we have this intention to do it right away. This will help us a lot to implement this traceability system. And finally, at the last part of the chain, this year the Ministry of Agriculture signed a convention with the ANTAD, with the National Association for department stores, and those who have these breeder rights. So we're not only talking about piracy, but we are also talking about other topics. We have this convention, we have this agreement, and we will be working with ANTAD, with the representative of the breeders. So I believe that with your help, we can have an influence on all of these topics. I believe that with all this, we can make the most of what we have. We can harness the potentialities of our country. I believe that that's it. Just for the sake of time, I know that there's a lot of information I could share with you. All of our work will continue, and we can have certain discussions with you. We will still structure more things to implement even more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victor, for explaining what SNCS is doing to protect the breeders' rights and to improve the enforcement of the protection of breeders' rights. I think you've explained that there's still a lot that can be improved, but that there's also opportunities and things that Dutch breeders can do in terms of registration and certification of their material with SNCS, which gives SNCS a better tool to actually enforce the regulations. Now, we are working as an embassy, we're working very closely with SNCS in this effort to better protect breeders' rights in Mexico, because we know it's such an important issue for Dutch breeders. And any breeders that are interested in knowing more or knowing more about what they can do to better protect their breeders' rights, or with whom to collaborate and what exactly to do here in Mexico, please contact us. We work very closely with SNCS and with Victor, so we can connect you to the right people. Also very interesting, your comparison with the berry sector, Victor, which is indeed a sector that has grown tremendously in Mexico, which is very successful also in exports. And it's very interesting to see the relation with how many varieties and are actually registered or being registered with SNCS for the berry sector, and the effect that has apparently had, and the connection, of course, with contract farming, which is a modality that is used very much in the berry sector, and how that has contributed to the success of this sector. So hopefully we can replicate some of that in the ornamental sector with some Dutch companies that are interested in such a modality. People can still ask their questions, but I don't see any question at this moment about breeders' rights. So, but please, if you do have questions, you can still ask them in the chat, or send them to us directly. But for now, I propose we go to our second guest, well, our third guest, but the second one who's going to react to the report, and that's Federico Martinez. Martinez is Director General of Plántulas de Tetela, or Tetela, I should say, and also of Fresias, and also the president of the Mexican Council, the Mexican Flower Council. Federico is an agronomist from the Tec de Monterrey, has 34 years of experience as a grower of ornamental plants, is a member of several working groups, among which the technical support group for the ornamental and forestry sectors of SNCS, the agency that we now know by now, since 2000 already, so 22 years. He has also written manuals, articles about the or articles for specialized magazines on the ornamental sector, and several growers guides for the ornamental sector. So Federico is a real authority on the sector, and that's why we're very happy to have you here in the webinar, Federico, to give your reaction to the report. The floor and the mic is yours, Federico.
Muchas gracias, Eric,
Thank you so much, Eric, for that introduction. Thank you very much for your words. I will now share my screen. Could you please confirm if you are able to see that? Can you see my screen?
Yes,
Yes,
we
we
can
can.
see it.
Yes, we can. Wonderful. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to say a huge thank you to the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Mexico City. Thank you so much, Agricultural Counselor Eric Plessier, for your interest in this sector. Thank you so much for your interest in plants and flowers in Mexico. Now, the Kingdom of the Netherlands has been interested for quite a while, as I understand, as Eric was telling me. They've done a number of studies on behalf of the embassy in Mexico City on our sector. And this is another study where the information is quite significant. So thank you so much for that interest. And I would like to say congratulations to Enrique and the whole team at OPF for this incredible work that you have done. Truly, it's quite illustrative. And I am sure that this is going to help everyone present here today. There's quite a lot of information in this study. So it's quite worth it to have the study and read it over at your leisure so that you can see all the information and all the numbers that are included in there. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to focus on giving you a summary of some of the numbers that are included in the study. Now, the total producers, total growers, 10,818, which represents the producers with a potential for suppliers from the Netherlands to work with. This is the market that we're talking about. Now, with these 10,818 producers, we have 13,000 hectares, which represents for the bulk market, this represents 1,500 million euros for cut flowers. 1.5 billion euros. And this is information from CIABI. This means 3.45 million euros. So this is a little more than half of what we're producing in Mexico are cut flowers and foliage. And the rest corresponds to potted plants or plants in containers. So what does this table say to us? It says that 89% of producers are small producers. They cultivate 51% of the hectares planted in Mexico. 10% of medium-sized producers cultivate 27% of the area in Mexico. And 1%, one big producer is cultivating 22% of the hectares. Something that's quite interesting here is that the areas where we have focus on supplying, both for plant material and technology, this classification, because of the level of technification that exists, is a very interesting topic that we've delved into at OPF, Ornamental Plants and Flowers, Mexico. So the majority of producers have a low or medium level of technification. So there's really quite a lot of opportunity there to work with producers and to improve their facilities and their production systems in order to make this market grow. It's important to consider that in Mexico, we have a lot of growers. The majority of them are small producers, small growers. And where do these growers come from? Well, the large slice of this grower pie, these are former employees of companies that work on producing plants and flowers. That's where they learned how to work in this sector. And they took that information and decided to start with a small business in this sector. And so many of them continue to be small sectors. They're small producers, they're family businesses. And these are people who perhaps their family is working with them, their uncle, their cousin, their wife. And this is how they became growers. They are former employees of large cut flower and ornamental flower companies. There are also some that perhaps were dedicated or worked in growing corn or other agricultural products, and they saw a possibility to start a business in ornamental flowers and plants, and they started to do that. Of course, many current growers are second or third generation growers, but they come from this sort of situation that I was mentioning to you. These are people who perhaps have other activities that they're working on. perhaps they work for a third party, and then they decided to make their own business in the sector and become self-employed in the plants, cut flower and plants market. So the majority of these producers are traditional growers. They have learned in an empirical way how to produce. They're very good at this. They have the calling to do this. But their methods or their production systems are quite traditional. There are few growers in our sector who have a professional degree in this area. So when we're analyzing the profile of these growers, we can see in general terms that they all need more training, more technification, and more professionalization for their businesses. Why? Well, why am I mentioning this? Because as a supplier, currently, Dutch companies and their representatives in Mexico, they have, and we have been working on this, on working on professionalizing growers and reaching out to them. And we've done this by starting with high quality plant material. And that's how we go with them and we work with them to see how we can enable them to cultivate that variety or that species in a better way. That species that we have supplied to them. And so we go with them and accompany them during their whole process. So everyone who's involved in this value chain, and for sure the suppliers of this value chain, we've worked and collaborated quite a bit on professionalizing growers over the years. In Mexico, we are highly dependent on providers of technology in general terms. If we start with plant material, we import quite a significant number of we import a significant amount of propagating material. For example, in 2020, $50 million of different propagating material like seeds, bulbs, seedlings, and cuttings. So we've already heard from Enrique and also from Victor that it's quite important to register these varieties when it's the right time. They need to be registered in order to protect them in the Mexican market. Now, talking more about the Mexican market and this study that Enrique was commenting on, we have seen in this sector significant growth. There's quite the supply. The sector has been experiencing this because of where growers are getting the material and how more and more growers are popping up. And we're seeing that a number of companies have come into play here, and that now they used to work for big cut flower and ornamental plant companies, and now they want to be self-employed. And so there is too much supply and a stagnation of prices. And even some products have seen their prices go down. And so this means that there aren't as much profits for the growers. And this means that their business is just about surviving. In Mexico, the commercialization system that we have for plants and flowers is quite traditional. We haven't seen meaningful change in the level of technification in quite a while. So what I want to say with this comment is that we commercialize our products in the same way we did 40 to 50 years ago. And so, that's not beneficial for our growers. That's beneficial for other people who are part of this value and supply chain, basically the bulk market people. These are the ones who are going to be benefiting from this. And when we're talking about the problems that growers are facing, there's a problem in commercialization and how they sell their products. Often the grower receives a percentage, a very low percentage of what the price would be to pay for the actual plants and flowers by the end consumer. What should we do? What can we do? What can we do to make us all benefit here? How can we have Dutch companies and their representatives in Mexico benefit? How can we benefit from having this market grow? And just as we were talking about the professionalization of growers, we need to support them so that they can have contract production, so that the planting and cultivating that they're doing is not speculative. They want to be able to know that when the product is ready, that they can sell it. And so that means we need agreements with the clients directly, whether they're bulk market clients or direct to client, direct to sellers. So we want to make sure that there is an assured market for these sellers.
Mainly because selling through retailers is becoming more and more, and there growers can establish an agreement to get a better price and ensure the sale of their product. We have to reiterate the importance of establishing this partnership with SNCs, and we can grow the market. The Mexican market has attained this maturity and even this point of stagnation. So it will be growing at a lower rate. But how can we boost that internal market? Through a permanent campaign to promote Mexican plants and flowers. This has been the aim of the Mexican Flower Council since 1995. And we haven't been able to consolidate this through a permanent campaign. We have made certain campaigns, but these are seasonal most of the times. There's a we consume a lot of flowers in Mexico. However, we can definitely increase that consumption habit, which is not that high. It's not even $20 per year per capita. Although the culture of buying flowers is present, we can definitely increase it considerably through a permanent campaign. And something else we mentioned is certification of legal flowers. I want to mention that yes, this certification Flor Legal, legal flower, is already implemented in Mexico. There is a corporation that for the timing is the only one that issues this type of certification, where the product can be certified, and actually any part of the value chain can have this certification in social responsibility. Workers, for example, must have a dignified salary. They should have good conditions with all the legal aspects and a support to the community. The respect to the breeders' rights, on the one hand, this respect to their rights must be enforced through the SNCs. That has to be complemented with these certification efforts. So when producers are certified, they're guaranteeing their customers that their plants sold respect breeders' rights. They pay royalties when it's the case, and respects the market. It respects all the aspects in the value chain that up to that point are part of the ANTAR. That's to say that those retailers are commercializing products coming from producers who respect the rights of everyone. So there are many ways, and this is important to highlight, mainly for the breeders who might be afraid of registering their varieties here in Mexico. They should know that there are many ways to protect their rights and to ensure the payment of royalties. There are many corporations who pay royalties to breeders even though the varieties are not registered. Even though the varieties are not registered. And how this is done? Well, mainly by raising awareness with the representatives on the importance of collecting the royalties and transferring them to the breeders. And the representatives in turn raise awareness with the growers, with other stakeholders, that this genetic material has advantages that will allow it to be more successful in the market. That will result in more economic benefits for everyone, unlike those that are not registered. So, as a starting point, we all should understand that these breeders' rights are part of the 27th article of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948. That's it. There they are. The breeders' rights are there. And we need to tell this to everyone, even the final consumer, so that they know that this is a human right enshrined in that convention. So this is an important topic. Best practices, that's to say, avoiding the excessive use of pesticides, being environmentally friendly, anything related to those best practices, best agricultural practices, so that the consumers know at the end of the chain that these producers, these growers, respect those practices. So this is important to incorporate as part of the production processes. This should be environmental friendly. And finally, we need to talk about a fair trade, where everyone receives their fair part of their participation. So in terms of exports, well, we need to talk about the internal market. This can be done mainly through what I was mentioning, the permanent campaign. And we also have a big potentiality, already mentioned as well, that for the time being, we haven't been able to harness, which is exporting cut flowers and foliage abroad. We mainly focus on cut flowers and foliage because there are many plant health restrictions derived from the application of the quarantine measures of the United States Department of Agriculture that prevents the entrance of certain plants with a certain substrates. So there are just a few species under very restrictive conditions that can enter their mainland. So for the time being, it is difficult to export potted plants or plants with substrate. But as part of the AIPH report, we understood that we have a €2 million market for foliage and cut flowers in the US and Canada. So this market is mainly supplied by the Netherlands, by Colombia, by Guatemala. But Mexico could be a new player. And what I have mentioned several times already is that if current growers have not been interested in exporting to this market with a great potential, let new players do that. So who can do this? Mexican investors who have this mindset, who are interested in exporting, who do not think that just to avoid the paperwork and just to avoid a couple of obstacles, well, they would just rather sell their products in Mexico. This has happened constantly and continuously, and we don't want that anymore. We want people who have this aim, this commitment to exporting their products abroad. And they focus everything they have. They focus all their efforts to do this. So there are many producers, many farmers who are producing different plants and who are actually exporting and who can easily turn their production into flower production. But we can also talk about new players, maybe people from the Netherlands, people from Colombia, people from the United States who are interested in doing that. So in terms of Dutch producers, and the stakeholders of that value chain of Dutch plants have already done that. They already have the experience. They, for example, went to Kenya, country where nobody was importing or exporting or even producing flowers, and now they're exporting a lot of flowers. They have this experience. This was a successful case, and now they're commercializing flowers, Kenyan flowers, in Europe. That's important. So for this approach to be successful, we need to start a project where we can focus on the different scale growers. When these come together and when they all have the aim to do this, when they all request the Flor Legal certification, they can open the doors to export. But we need to create what I call the flower hub, which should be located in some strategic place of our country, where we have different flowers from many different regions of our country, where we have more producers, more growers interested in commercializing their products, And as this flower hub, we can address the needs of that market, including the fact that the production of cut flowers and foliage that can be commercialized in the US and Canada may preserve their cold chain and their water chain. If a part of those 69 million pesos that are exported to these markets preserve those chains, then we will be able to guarantee the quality of the products, which currently nobody does. Nobody does that. Nobody preserves those cold chains. So yes, the potential to grow is there. The potential to access that market and make it grow can be improved. This 2 million euro market in the US and Canada. And this is taking into account that there's a lot of interest in the United States, mainly in gardening and potted plants and so forth. So there's an important consumption of flowers, yes, that's true, but the per capita consumption for cut flowers in Canada is not that high either, as we have it in Europe, where it is common to have people buying, I don't know, a bouquet of flowers every 2 weeks or so, and they constantly preserve this habit. So we can grow this market even more, and of course, we can do it through Mexican products.
No, muchas gracias por su atención.
And with that, I will end my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Federico, for reacting to the study and for laying out the opportunities that you see, both in the export market, but also in the national market, where you also see opportunities for growth. I think ever since I arrived in Mexico, people talk about the ornamental sector in Mexico as the sleeping giant, a sector that is already quite big, but has a lot of potential for growth. Well, let's hope that with initiatives like this we can help to awake this sleeping giant. And I think we have all the right people in the webinar today for those companies from the Netherlands that would like to capitalize on all the opportunities that have been presented. So I would please, I would really like to encourage you to contact us so that we can connect you to the people here, and so that they can connect you to the right growers and help you with the right procedures to register your varieties in case you are a breeder, or to connect you with the right growers in case you are a breeder or a technology provider. I think we don't have any questions, or do we have a new question? Okay, I think this is a question in general for the audience, but no more questions for the speakers at this moment. So I think what we're already also a bit over time. So I think we're going to close the session. And before that, I would really like to thank all the speakers that have participated today, that have presented their the study and the reactions to their study. Also to the participants. We have had more than 100 participants today, so I think that shows the interest both from the Mexican and the Dutch side to collaborate and to participate in this sector. Please don't lose this interest, and also participate in the next activities that will be organized. I already mentioned the OPF trade show next September. Usually before that trade show, there's some field trips that are organized to growers around Mexico City, so that you can get a good impression of the state of the growers and the state of the sector here in Mexico. So that's another thing I would like to recommend. For now, thanks again for your participation. And just to repeat that we're here to connect you with any of the people that you would like to connect to from this webinar. Thank you very much, and have a good day in the Netherlands, or have a good day in Mexico and a good evening in the Netherlands. Bye-bye.